time. Let's go ahead and get started. So I would like to welcome you. This is the fourth session of our 2025 version of our twice monthly series of virtual Wednesday roundtables. We use these to bring to you the latest information in both clinical and non-clinical issues important to the equine veterinarian. This roundtable tonight is entitled Charging for Remote Consultation. Our expert tonight on this subject is Dr. Alexandru Pop. Once we get started, I'll let him introduce himself further. But first, a bit of housekeeping. This is what you've heard me say just a minute ago. Please, we want your interaction with these. Comments, chat, saying hi can go in the chat box, but specific questions that you hope to get acknowledged need to go in the Q&A box, please. And also, if you'll look at probably the bottom of your screen, I can't swear that's where it is on a phone, but you'll see a react button that has a little heart icon. And feel free to use those emoticons to react to Dr. Pop, to give him a thumbs up, or yeah, there we go, or a heart, because he's just basically looking at a blank screen, and it really helps to have that, those emojis going past occasionally. So don't be shy about using those. So chat in the chat box, Q&A in the Q&A box. Now, before we get started, a couple more things. I do want to remind everyone that these sessions do not carry race-accredited CE. And a quick shout out to Kevin Hinchman, our IT man, who is so far behind the curtain you can't even see him, but he's standing by in case we have trouble. But before we start tonight, we want to thank our sponsor for this session, American Regent Animal Health. And I'd like to give sponsor representative, Dr. Kelly Matheny, a few moments to speak. And then Dr. Matheny, when you're finished, if you'd pass over that virtual mic to Dr. Pop, please.
Sounds good. Thank you, Karen. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Kelly Matheny. I'm a professional services veterinarian at American Regent Animal Health, the makers of Out-of-Clan IM and Beta Vet. I want to give a big thank you to you all for attending tonight. Your passion for animals and dedication to their care is truly important work, very meaningful work. American Regent Animal Health is proud to be an educational partner of AAEP for over 15 years, supporting educational opportunities that benefit the association, its members, and most importantly, the horses. We're excited to sponsor this evening's virtual roundtable session on the important topic of charging for remote consultation with Dr. Alexandru Pop. Thanks again for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us this evening. And if you'd like more information on American Regent Animal Health or our products, you can visit aranimalhealth.com. Now, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Pop for tonight's roundtable.
Thanks so much, Dr. Matheny.
All right, I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. Did that come up okay?
It looks good from my end.
Perfect. All right. So to start, usually I don't have any other financial interest or arrangement with any other company. I am the president of Appalachian Veterinary Services. We're a private practice here in Southwestern Virginia. I'll tell you a little bit about my background and kind of what got me here. So I was actually born in Romania. My family immigrated to the United States when I was 2 years old. We've kind of migrated down the East Coast since living here, but I did my undergraduate and vet school at NC State and graduated in May of 2019. About a year later, after working my first job in southeastern North Carolina, I bought the practice that I'm currently at. We have grown from a 3 to a now 7 doctor, true mixed animal practice. Primarily do large animal, probably 75% plus is large animal. And most of that is horses, but we do see everything except for pigs and exotics. So to go through a little bit of what we're going to get done tonight is go through what remote consultation really means. Remote consultation, I feel like in our profession is something that everybody wishes that they could do. I don't know that anybody, including myself, has figured out quite how to do it perfectly or do it well. But I think understanding what it means, understanding the true worth of our own expertise as equine large animal veterinarians, structuring a fee model. I think this is probably the most common question that I get whenever somebody asks me about this. And then effectively presenting the value. How are we going to communicate what we're doing with our clients? Because ultimately, they're the ones that have to support this. The one thing that I will say that I'm not going to talk about is specific pricing. And it might disappoint some people, but we have people from the East Coast to the West Coast and everywhere in between. For me to tell you how much to charge exactly for remote consultation would be pretty inappropriate just because it might not be relevant. So we're going to talk in terms of how to set your fees, but that's going to be a very individual thing to do. So the best part about all this is you are already a remote consultant. You may not know it. You may know it and not be charging for it, but this is nothing new. This is stuff that we all have been doing. I'm just going to challenge everybody to look at it from a little bit of a different perspective tonight. The other main thing to keep in mind is this entire presentation assumes that a valid VCPR has already been established. So again, similar to the pricing, state by state, the VCPR is defined a little bit differently. So we're just going to assume that wherever you are, you have an established VCPR. That's going to make the whole rest of this presentation make a lot more sense and be a lot more legal to actually implement. So what is remote consultation? So we're providing advice, we're making diagnoses, we're guiding clients without being physically present. And this can be a variety of things. So it's email, text, phone calls. These are things that we're all doing every single day. Looking at pictures, especially in today's modern age, where clients are often sending us pictures or videos of stuff before they decide whether or not it needs to be seen. That is considered remote consultation. Protocol development from something as simple as just creating a vaccine protocol for your local area and the disease risk that your patients have. It seems really simple, but your average person walking down the street does not know how to do that. And that advice is valuable. All the way up to more in-depth protocols like breeding protocols, repro protocols, SOPs for specific farms and how they operate. Ongoing advice. So even just having access. There are so many new companies that are popping up every single day they're offering remote consultation for a fee because they have figured out that people want this. And even if it's just having access to a veterinarian 24/7 to be able to ask a question or to text them, they're paying for this already. I would sure love for my clients to be using us, but it doesn't hurt to also get paid for that time that you're spending. And then the main thing is research. So I feel like everybody here is a great person. I feel like veterinarians are the most wonderful people that I've ever met, and we're almost too wonderful because we feel like the day that we graduated, our education has ended. We're expecting of ourselves to know everything on that first day post-graduation, and we always, or at least me, feels this inherent guilt if you have to look something up or if you have to read a new article or look at new cases that are being published every single day. Think about it from the viewpoint of an attorney looking at case law. I mean, case law changes, I would say, less frequently than medicine. I think that has plateaued a little bit. Medicine is changing so frequently, and I think to say that we should be expected to know everything is inappropriate. But to conduct that research is perfectly okay to charge for it. And I'll tell you, my attorney that I use, I will tell this story forever, charged me a tenth of an hour, so 6 minutes of time, to read an email that I sent. I got no response. It was to open it and to review what I said. And I got an invoice. It was like $28 or something. So I'm not saying we should do that. The lawyers don't have a great reputation either, but it's something to really consider. And I don't think that our industry is out of being able to do this. So diving into defining what remote consultation can look like for us equine veterinarians, these are some of the more traditional things that I don't think any of us are uncomfortable calling remote consultation. And there might even be some of us here that are already charging for this sort of stuff. So creating vaccine and wellness plans, like we talked about, reviewing feed history and nutritional data. These are conversations that we're having every single day. Advising clients on genetic pairings and risk factors. So looking at some of the genetically related diseases and seeing if we should be breeding horse X to horse Y and why or why not. Assisting clients sort of aside from that in the selection of their studs for AI. Some clients just know that they want a foal. They have no idea where to start looking. And that research is definitely a remote consultation that we can be charging for. Behavioral concerns and training. I know on the small animal side, I feel like COVID really pushed a lot of people that were on the edge of animal ownership into owning animals. And a lot of those people didn't have their research done. They were not prepared for what that ownership looked like. And I feel like that means horses as well. So a lot of these horses that we're seeing now, 5 years post the beginning of COVID, are maybe a little bit more poorly behaved. Maybe they didn't get the training that they needed. And who better than the folks that are going to be putting ourselves in the riskiest situations with those horses to train those clients on how to train those horses or where to seek good advice for those horses. And I think that that's definitely something that we can be charging for. And then something that I think we do every day is emergency recognition. So teaching clients what's an emergency, what's not an emergency. So this is all pretty simple, pretty vanilla. I challenge you to think about it just a little bit more risky. So how would you feel about evaluating a lameness completely over a video? Doing that, if you try to put that into terms of what you would be doing in person, is performing the visual portion of a lameness exam. There's nothing that you can't see on video. And I would argue that sometimes most of my lameness exams that I do, I video them for myself and I watch them over in slow motion after the fact. There's no reason why that can't be done by a client with very specific instruction on how to do it. Or even a trained technician within your practice can go obtain that imagery for you while you get to do either other things or be providing other remote consultation. So providing guidance on colic via video or phone call or a FaceTime. The first thing that I always do for my colic exams is I get a heart rate. I think an owner is very capable of doing that with a little bit of training. An owner can listen for gut sounds on their horse. An owner can take their horse's temperature. An owner can show you their horse's gum color. There's a lot of stuff that owners can do that we are doing initially that we can easily interpret to a pretty good extent remotely. And we might already be doing this, but the question is, why aren't we charging for it? Because sometimes that's where it ends. Sometimes it ends up that everything is completely normal by that point, and you've saved yourself a trip out there, and you've saved that owner quite a bit of money from having to pay for an after-hours call. New client onboarding and new horse owner training, I think, is a big one, because we're all having these conversations the first time that we meet either a new client or somebody that's just stepping into horse ownership. I saw a client yesterday, a new client to our practice, who just got a donkey. They know nothing about donkeys, and those clients, to me, are some of my favorites because they don't come with bad habits. They don't come with knowledge that you have to untrain. And this is something that we can absolutely build on remotely if we're not doing it completely remotely. But things that we can build on, talking about nutrition and training. So this is no different than just having this conversation at a visit. Looking at nutritional changes. So if clients submit records, we have some clients that every time I show up, they have the feed label ripped off the bag and ready to send it home with me so they can tell me all about the feed that they've been doing. And I love that. But that is also something that they can take a picture of and send remotely. And I can just as easily look at that without having to be there in person and make my day a whole lot more efficient. So the in-person version of this would be just doing that at either a sick visit or just at a wellness visit. Wound triage, I think, is a big one. So, and training clients first response. So what do you do? Even if it is something that the veterinarian needs to come see, what should they be doing in the meantime? Or even figuring out how bad this wound is, I think is definitely something that steps into the remote consultation. So this is very similar to triaging something in person. And then remote medication and lab results review. So this would mean something beyond the normal scope of reporting results. So let's say you're doing ACTH testing, looking for Cushing's, beyond just having that basic conversation with the client. If you really need to sit down and talk through management, diet, what does life look like for this cushingoid horse moving forward? I do think that sometimes that can be beyond the normal scope of what we would be expected to do without charging. So for me, looking at some of this stuff after thinking about it, some of it might make you uncomfortable. Some of it, and that's what's supposed to, but it's challenging you to think about what the capabilities of these degrees that we've all earned can actually be. So all we're doing here is we are transitioning ourselves from framing our value, and that is internal and external value, from our purpose being a performing veterinarian to an advising veterinarian. So pretty simple, but kind of a challenging thing because that's something that I feel like we have ingrained within ourselves over the years. Are there any questions at this point so far that we can get through?
I'm not seeing any questions yet. Everyone, don't be shy about putting them in the Q&A box. And remember, with the Q&A box, you can ask a question anonymously. So, but at this point, nope, no questions.
Perfect. So we'll jump right into convincing yourself that this is all very okay. So the global telehealth market value is just over $300 billion. If you look at the worldwide economy, this is not a huge chunk, but it is growing and it is there. And this number is a whole lot higher than my paycheck. So to be able to have a portion of this very large pie, I think we're at the very young stages of remote consultation for veterinarians. And the sooner we get this figured out, and I think those innovative practices that are going to move forward into this are going to be the early adopters of something that I do think is going to become a lot more normal moving forward. And this also offers us an advantage. We always talk about the disadvantages of equine practice. We can't be as efficient as small animal. Owners aren't quite as emotional about their animals. We have a great big variety of clients, but something that we really can leverage and something that we are very well positioned to utilize is our owners are very involved. Our owners are very educated, and our owners are very willing to do things with their horses, whereas that's a very different culture than they have in small animals. So something that we can do is really capitalize on how much we can train and advise our owners to do, which I don't think that there is as big of a role in small animal as much as there is in large animal for this. So how are we going to convince ourselves that this is something worthwhile? So my theory is that we have groomed ourselves over years and years and years of practice into this corner where clients primarily view us as task performing technicians. If you don't put your stethoscope up against that animal and if you don't touch it, most clients aren't going to be able to interpret that you have actually done something. And that is our own fault. It is just how things have moved over a very long time. But your expertise has real value. And whether that value is being transmitted live in person on farm or over the phone or over a video call or an email or a text or any other remote delivery system, it does not make that information any less valuable. Now, we can talk about this all day long, and I think that we could all have a really great conversation and leave it being super pumped up and say, okay, yep, we're all going to go do remote consultation. And unfortunately, unless you can convince your clients to pay for it, it is as valuable as what they're willing to pay for it. That's how the market works. We can put a lot of value in this for ourselves, but unless we convince our clients that it's valuable, it's not going to hold any value. The most important part of selling anything is you have to know your product in and out, and you have to believe in what you are selling. If you approach remote consultation hesitantly, if you look at it as a second best, clients are very, very astute at picking things up because they're not just horse owners. I know most horse owners view us as just veterinarians. We're always there in the clinic with our hand hovering over the phone, waiting for somebody to call 24/7. Horse owners have other lives too, and they're consumers in tons of different markets. And consumers are very smart. Consumers are becoming more and more intelligent. And if they pick up that you don't believe in remote consultation, then why would they believe in remote consultation? They're going to be much more reluctant to pay for it. So you really, truly have to see the value in it. The only thing that we are really selling here is our time. Time is the only finite resource that we have that diminishes throughout the day. No matter how efficient we are, we still unfortunately only have 24 hours a day. So you can set a number and you can say, I'm going to charge this much per hour. The maximum amount of money that you can generate per day is that number times 24. And there's no way to change that. However, using something like remote consultation can give you more opportunities, create more appointment slots, or money generating opportunities throughout your day, because you can provide multiple units of advice within that same time frame. Think about it as selling an ebook. You write one ebook and then you sell that same PDF thousands of times. You don't have to physically write out that book, and you don't, that time is not taken up in the same way. So think about all the uncompensated time that we spend throughout the day. So let's say you take 4 calls a day, and you spend 10 minutes on each call. And it's not just 10 minutes, but it's the couple minutes before thinking about it. Maybe you have to pull up a record. It's the actual phone call, which might take 4, 5, 6 minutes or more. And then it's afterwards, whatever you were doing before, it might take you. I have a problem with, if I walk away from something, I have like 15 minutes of transition between my tasks. I can't just jump from one thing to another. So each phone call sort of derails your day just a little bit. So if you do that consistently, 10 minutes, 4 phone calls, that's 3 hours and 15 minutes a week. It's 170 hours a year. This is where we are going to talk about pricing a little bit. But think about what you charge per hour. And I just threw an easy math number out here. But let's say for your professional services, you charge $300 an hour on average. That's $51,000 of opportunity in that amount of time spent in those phone calls per day. And this is working days. I would love to be able to capture that. For some folks, that's a pretty big chunk of another associate, or that is a great technician, or that is another a couple support staff assistants. So it's a lot. It's a new X-ray. It's an endoscope. It's a lot of things. And the point here is not to say that every single minute that you spend chatting with your clients needs to be paid. But I think for us to realize that we are losing opportunity to where instead of spending that 3 hours on the phone per week, we could be spending it at an appointment. And the more demand that clients have of us nowadays to be available, and they expect us to be able to answer their phone calls pretty quickly. We have to satisfy our clients, and that time is going to be taken up, and we either charge for it or we can't do it a lot of times. So we'll dive deeper a little bit into the science of why our advice is valuable and why it actually benefits us and the clients to be charging for it. So there are several studies done about the sunk cost fallacy. So we inherently put more value towards something that we have paid for because nobody likes to feel stupid for buying something. So I don't know how many of you have ever enrolled in a free course online. There's so many out there versus a paid course. Time and time again, studies show that people that pay for courses are much more likely to commit themselves to them and much more likely to follow that advice than they are for a free course. And that is just subconsciously, we want to convince ourselves that we have made the right decision when we're spending our hard-earned money. The same thing with free coffee and paid coffee. The paid coffee is going to taste just a little bit better most of the time because we want to feel like we made the right choice for paying for coffee, even if it's the identical cup. We also live in a low trust society nowadays. You know, people that see things that are too good to be true typically think that they're too good to be true. So, you know, think about the value of what if you saw a lawyer that was giving free advice? I'd probably ask myself, why? Can they not afford to charge for their services? Are they not very good? Are people not willing to pay them for this? So I think that, you know, to get something for free nowadays, a lot of people are going to ask why. And if they don't do that out loud, their brain, because they're human, is still going to do that somewhere deep inside. Affective devaluation is an interesting one. So this is a cognitive bias that lessens the reward of what we do, the more that we do it. So our perceived value of the outcome decreases with repetition. So pretty much what this means for us is the longer we give free advice, or every single contact point that we have where we are giving free advice to clients, that advice gets less and less valued over time because it becomes not special anymore. So, you know, if you think about that, we've been doing this without charging for it for years and years and years. We're finally realizing that this is something that we could and should be charging for because it is valuable. The longer we don't do it, the harder of a transition it's going to be to do it once we decide to. And then the perceived value of something. So the perceived value that a client gets when they are paying for something similar to the sunk cost fallacy is going to be higher. But the main thing here is we don't want our recommendations to fall to the same level as those that they have gotten elsewhere. So if they ask us for advice and we give them very sound advice that took years and years of expertise and experience building and education, and then they ask somebody on Facebook the same question, or they ask somebody with a significantly lower experience level, lower education level, that advice is going to be a lot closer in value to the client if it was both given for free. And unfortunately, that's just a reality of how the brain works. So remind yourself that the advice that we give carries a lot of weight. Clients are not just asking us for an opinion. They are reaching out to us because they assume that we have the expertise and that we have the best opinion. And charging for that is completely appropriate because our recommendations are not just opinions. We unfortunately don't have that luxury to be wrong. Even sitting across the dinner table, I mean, my wife's uncle, every Thanksgiving will ask me some obscure question about their dogs because I'm a vet and vets know everything, even though I haven't touched a dog in a long, long time. And unfortunately, I can't just tell him anything because whatever I give him is professional advice. And if he takes that and he uses it and something horrible happens, that's my fault. That advice that I gave has legal implications, it has ethical implications, and I can't just brush it off. Now, as much as I would love to charge my wife's uncle for giving advice over the Thanksgiving table, I'm not going to do that. But there are lots of people that we don't have those relationships with that ask us those same levels of question. And I don't think that they understand that our advice does carry a lot of weight with it, a lot of risk that we are assuming when we're giving this advice. And assuming risk costs money. And that's just the reality of any profession. So just keep this in the back of your mind that we sort of wrote off that luxury to be wrong in this profession. So hopefully we all are firm believers that that remote consultation is something of value. But before we move on, are there any questions yet?
Yeah, we have one question that you might get to later, but I'll go ahead and ask it now. How and when do you distinguish between paid time and not paid time when talking to your clients? And how do you communicate that to your clients?
Beautiful. Yes. We're going to answer the first part of that question in this next section and the second part in the section after that.
Perfect. And we did just have one pop in while I was reading that, so let me see if I can get this one right. I think the biggest roadblock to implementing this is how does one practice implement teleconsult fees when surrounding practices do not, especially in a particularly equine vet dense area. As is, people leave our practice because we implemented a mandatory physical exam at an extremely discounted rate annually to continue to approve medications, et cetera, because owners had previously never been asked.
Well, I love that. And congratulations to whoever asked that question for taking that leap, because that's not an easy thing to do. And our practice did the same thing. And we were met with the same exact reaction. I will tell you, looking in the future, a couple years from where you're currently at, they come back. And that's just the first step to changing. And if you don't, you're just going to be the same. So to answer your question more specifically, there is a risk that you take whenever you're doing this. This will really help better define the type of client that is for your practice. So the clients that leave because you are offering a higher quality service that you are now going to charge for, you should ask yourself, and it's never easy to watch clients leave, but you should truly ask yourself, if I could clone this client that's leaving and all of my clients would be this person, would I? And if the answer is no, then maybe that's not the practice for them anyway. You need to look at the clients that are adopting your changes with open arms and seeing the value in what you're doing and understanding that you're doing this to be more sustainable. Those practices that aren't willing to make that change are not going to survive in the long-term future of this profession. I know that for a fact. There are several practices in our area on the small animal side that were we don't do a physical exam, we give everything a shot of steroids, we're the cheap vet. And when it came time for those vets to retire, they did not have anything attractive to sell. And it was kind of sad because those practices just sort of dissolve away. So in modern times, what you're doing is right. those other practices are either going to catch up and change, or they're going to dissolve over time. So do not be worried.
And actually, I think one more, because you had just mentioned risk. Assuming an existing VPCR, what are the consultant services viewed by PLIT and state liability regulations? Or how are they viewed?
Knock on wood, I haven't had to challenge that question. So specifically, I'm not sure. I would assume that they would be viewed in the same fashion that they view any medical record. So, and we'll talk about this a little bit, but for these remote consultations, we do take it a step further, and that's part of why we charge for it, is it does generate a medical record. The client does get a copy of what was discussed. So they do have something tangible to walk away with. But it would be viewed at the same rate as, if you put forward a treatment plan remotely, then the same follow-up requirements would be instilled. It's just the follow-up might be remote, and that's where you check on, how's the dose doing? How are we progressing? Are we getting better or worse? So I do think that liability would fall in the same way. But the reality of it is, whether or not we charge for it doesn't matter. You can give free advice, and PLIT would look at it in the same way, because they do not care if you charged for your advice or not. It's the advice that and the performance of what you're doing that actually comes into scrutiny when stuff like that happens.
That was a important answer there. Thank you. We do have one more question, but I'm going to hang on to that one till the end.
Okay. All right. So structuring a fee model, how are we going to charge for this? So this is actually kind of a funny photo from my first year in practice, where COVID happened and we were all freaked out and had no idea what was going on. So this is a FaceTime recheck from an SPL that I had put in, and it went great, and the client was very happy to pay for it. It ended up being cheaper than it would have been for me to come out and do it in person, so they were thrilled. But this is a very, very possible thing. So the way that we structure our consultation fees, you can do it in several different ways. You can do it hourly, which I think is the more traditional way to think about it. You can go case by case, so a per unit charge, or you can do it as an added value to your practice, or use it as something to retain your better clients, or differentiate your practice from one another. We'll talk about that a little bit more deeply. So for hourly, let's say a client wants you to interpret several years of Lyme test results. This is actually something that we had happen. We had a client call, and they have had their horse tested for Lyme and treated for Lyme several years. And they just kind of wanted somebody to gather all of that information together and look at it all at once, just to see sort of, what's happening. Where are these, how effective are the treatments every single time that we get reinfected? So that would fall under this hourly category. How much time does it take to pull up those records? How much time does it take to look at that stuff and to report it? And then if there's any changes or any treatment plan that needs to be made, that's definitely something that would fall under this. Virtual training and virtual client education, kind of how we talked about that new horse owner education. So this can be something like training barn staff even. If you have a boarding facility that you have a lot of clients at, usually it's not the owners of that facility that are doing the feeding and the treatments if any horses are on medications there. And I think it's really important to offer that to clients, to say that, we would be happy to show your staff exactly how to administer oral medications, exactly how to mix up these feeds, because it's important that the animals get the medication correctly. And if the barn owner is not somebody that's comfortable doing that, I think that for the sake of their own business and making sure that the horses under their care are being treated appropriately, that'd be a very appropriate thing to offer, and definitely to charge for that time. Legal or insurance consultation. So this could be something like interpreting a pre-purchase exam. I know pre-purchase exams are often sort of ulcer-inducing for a lot of people, but we have had folks that have brought a pre-purchase, so clients of ours that have gotten a pre-purchase from another veterinarian, and they bring us that information to look over and to give our opinion on it. That would be a totally appropriate thing to just look at and interpret those records. But that's definitely something that we should charge for, because especially with something like pre-purchase, that can have negative implications if we give bad advice, even if it's based on the examination of another veterinarian. And then ongoing case management, in-depth consultation regarding specific things. So something that I have a couple of case examples at the end, but developing SOPs. So we had a client purchase a large equine facility and turned it into a big repro barn without really any background in equine reproduction. So we sat down and we helped create SOPs as far as, what do you need to have on hand to manage a foal? How should a foaling look? What stuff do you need? We spent hours working together with that client, putting this stuff together, and we absolutely charged for that time. On a case by case, I feel like everything in the world is going to a subscription. So it's not going to be too uncommon. I don't know of, there's a couple small animal practices, some startups, mostly on the West Coast, that are trying the subscription-based small animal practice model. But a subscription-based service to say, if you pay X amount per month, you have access to, you can call us either whenever you want, or you can call us, we'll triage your emergencies. But I think that this would be something a little bit more challenging to do, but definitely something to explore. We personally have not figured out a great way to use anything like this. We view our VCPR and our wellness exams as a subscription. For a flat fee, so case by case, let's say somebody calls you with an emergency after hours. I know that this has happened. I wish I could see the faces of everybody on the other side of the screen, but how many times have you been called and woken up in the middle of the night by a client that's been either sitting on an emergency for several hours, and it's not really an emergency, but it's an emergency to them, and you get woken up, you have to turn your brain back on, you talk them through it because it's not actually an emergency, and then you're up for the extended period of time afterwards, either worrying about, are they going to call back? How's this horse doing? Should I have gone? Am I, all of these thoughts, they consume lots of time and lots of stress. I think that it would be completely appropriate to have a flat fee to say, if you want access to me after hours, then this is the fee that you're going to pay. And you can even have a soft push into it. And if you end up going, that fee gets put towards the rest of the bill. But if we don't end up going, then that's the fee to be able to talk through it with me after hours. And I think that's a pretty fair ask. And I think that would also eliminate a lot of these, I'll just call anyway and see. I'm sure the vet's up at 2:30 in the morning watching movies. So that would be a great way to implement this on a case-by-case basis. Second opinion consultations, sort of similar to the pre-purchase, but this could be something like a treatment plan or looking at radiographs. that somebody else has taken, and they just bring those to you. Those are something that you can standardize, like image review fee, not necessarily charge hourly, but just get it down to a case by case. And then similar with the diagnostic reviews. And then my favorite, and I think this is the biggest takeaway for folks that aren't doing this at all, because the added value retainer model of structuring these fees is one of the easiest ways to implement this into your practice. So we actually utilize this quite a bit with our VCPR for cattle clients. Cattle clients are a way different breed than equine clients. But a couple of years ago, we all know that a lot of the antibiotics that used to be on the shelf got pulled off. And so a lot of these bovine clients had a really hard time coming to terms with the fact that a veterinarian would have to step foot on their farm once a year for them to have access to these drugs. So we have built on that and added it to the VCPR, and we have sort of added that to the VCPR with some of the clients that have been slower to adopt our physical exam and our wellness program, to say, yeah, if you do this physical exam and you do these recommended vaccines, you have access to talk to a doctor. You have access to us after hours. You get priority for your urgent things that need to be seen during the day over people that don't do this. So not necessarily charging for it itself, but using it as an added value for them doing the other stuff that you're having a harder time implementing and them getting used to. And you can even say it as specifically like, if you do your wellness exam and your wellness program with us, you'll get one free consultation per year. And whether they use it or not, people love free stuff. I think the automotive repair industry, they have you get your oil changed and you have a 129-point safety check. Well, if you've ever read through that, it's like car has seat belts, check. Car has all windows, check. So it doesn't have to be anything extremely valuable, but that number, your average person doesn't know what they're checking. So that is also something that we can utilize, just to say you're getting more for doing this stuff, and we're rewarding the responsible horse ownership. So this is going to answer that question of when do we implement a charge and when do we not? And this is something that is a constant work in progress, and it's not a perfect system, but feel free to take this and alter it so it fits your practice. Share this with your technicians and who's answering the phones, because this is it's an oversimplification of it, but it's a place to start. So is the inquiry a simple clarification of previous advice? So is the client just wanting to get clarity on either something that is on the medical record or something that you've already discussed? If yes, yeah, we probably aren't going to charge that. If no, then we'll see, okay, how deep do we have to go? Do we have to pull up the record and sit down and look at stuff? If not, yeah, probably something that's simple. So you can keep going down this. The overarching umbrella of when to charge and when to not. Is this the first time that this client in particular has asked for this? If yes, then that is a great opportunity for you to build as much value in remote consultation as possible at the end of the conversation and say, this one was free, the next one won't be, because then they won't be surprised. But you really take that opportunity for them to hang up the phone and say, wow, I would have no problem paying for that in the future because that saved me a visit, that eased my mind, that got us a treatment plan going a lot faster than if I would have waited for an in-person visit. So there's a lot of benefits that can be done, but we'll get into the communication of all this a little bit further on. So the hardest part is going to be the next part of how we're going to tell our clients about this. And I hate to approach it as how we're going to break the news to our clients about this, because it's not a negative thing at all, but it is going to be a challenging thing. But before we jump in, are there any other questions that I can answer about fee structuring?
No, I think we're good for the moment. Again, I do have a couple of questions now, but I think they can wait.
Perfect. So one of the first questions you're going to get when you're doing this is, why should I pay? You didn't even do anything. All you did was you talked to me. Well, think about the lawyer charging me almost $30 to read my email. If we were all in a room together now, these are the things that we would say, because these are the things that we're charging for. We're charging for our liability. We're charging for the risk that we're taking. We're charging for the expertise that we're sharing, that we all paid loads of money to obtain and lost countless hours of sleep to get. And our time, we get the same 24 hours that anybody else does. And if we're spending that doing something for somebody else, you can only do it out of the goodness of your heart for so long. That doesn't pay the rent. We could all have a conversation about that and have a lot of fun doing it and really justify it well. But your clients are not going to care about that. They do not want to hear the justifications that we are using to convince one another as colleagues of why this is okay to do. And that is going to get you a lot of frustration and a lot of backlash. So you really have to reframe how you're going to present this to your clients, not from we're doing this because we have to, and I'm going to talk at you and tell you why you're going to have to pay for this. Think about why do you buy something? It's because you see the thing is more valuable than the money sitting in your pocket. Nobody likes to be sold to. We all like to shop, but we really have to see the value. So conveying that value to the client is going to be the most important thing. So talking in terms of, here's how this is going to benefit you. Here's how this is going to save you money instead of costing you money. Because that's going to be the main thing, is they're used to not paying for it. And then here's how this is going to solve your problem quicker. Because our attention span and our need for instant gratification nowadays is so high that I really think that the faster resolution can play part. And I'll share a strategy that we use, sort of going off of this faster resolution, to integrate new associates into our practice. Whenever we have clients that are very particular, so we have 6 large animal vets. Whenever we have clients that are very particular about one vet in specifically, and that person gets overloaded with clients, we have 2 new vets that are going to be joining us here pretty soon to make 7. We're going to have to get those folks clients of their own. And a strategy that we use is we sort of push the schedule out about a month. And if it's something that doesn't need to be seen fast, we'll say, okay, if you have a doctor preference, we can definitely schedule them, and it'll be about a month and a half from now. Or we can have Dr. So-and-so come out 2 days from now. Clients are going to be very apt to say, oh yeah, it's not that big of a deal, just send out so-and-so. So sort of a tangent, but it is a really great strategy, and it sort of plays off of this instant gratification. I don't want to wait. And you can utilize that to implement these remote consultations as well. So this goes back to really having to believe in what you're doing and really having to believe in the value that you're giving the client. So you don't need to say, oh, well, I have to charge for this because my genius boss said that we have to do this and they think it's the greatest thing ever. And I really don't. That is not making your client happy to pay for it. And it's really just going to hurt everything around. So you can say something like, hey, for $50, you're going to get my undivided attention on this. And I'm going to sit down and I'm going to work for this. And we're going to make a clear plan. And we are going to make sure that we have a fast resolution and get the best decision for this event here. we are not very good salespeople. That's why we're veterinarians. Otherwise, we'd all be salespeople. But you do kind of have to think about it because we are playing in the same game as anybody else. This is a for-profit industry, just full of really good, empathetic, and just good-natured people. And I think that we kind of take that a little bit too much to the extreme and feel guilty for charging for stuff sometimes. So talk about the outcome. Don't talk about what you're doing, but talk about how this is going to end up. To say, hey, this is going to take me some time. I'm not going to be able to go to appointments while I'm doing this, obviously. So I am going to have to charge some consultation time. But this way, you're not going to get me looking at my phone while I'm driving down the road. You're going to get me sitting, looking at a computer with my undivided attention, taking great notes, and I'm going to have the best advice for you that I possibly can by doing this. So really, really inflate the value of what you're doing there. And then positioning the consultation as an advantage. So you're really going to be drawn to compare it to an in-person visit and say, sort of look at it as the next best thing. It's hard not to do that. I still do that, and I'm probably going to do that throughout the rest of this presentation at some point. But it's important to say, don't focus on it as a second best. Don't say, since I can't come out today, I guess we could just do a remote consult. Play on how quickly that you can get it done and say, hey, look, I've got 20 minutes in a couple hours. I can prepare. We can sit down, do a remote consultation. In the meantime, you can send me XYZ and I'll have time to look at it. We'll spend 15, 20 minutes talking about it. It'll cost you $40 or whatever you want to charge for it. And, depending on how all of your other fees are, that might sound really great to the client. You're telling me we can do this an hour from now, and it's going to cost me less than a farm visit and certainly less than a physical exam. That sounds great. Well, yeah, let's do it. So this just sort of goes a little bit further in that in long run, consultation can save the client money. They're not going to view it that way to start, but to communicate that and compare it to the costs for those clients that are focused a lot more on money, you can say that it is going to be more economical than a farm visit. You're not going to be able to do everything remotely, but for the things that you can, I think that that's a huge benefit and a really good way to try to implement this. So you can definitely expect objections, lots of them, and it really depends on the size of your practice and the size of your clientele. I wouldn't expect that the implementation of something like this is going to be something that would ruin a practice. I don't think that because you don't have to draw such a deep line in the sand. I'm a big fan of testing things, and if it works, we'll build on it. If not, we'll sort of step back away from it. So as you're testing this, as you're slowly implementing this and seeing what it feels like, you should definitely expect some objections. So we'll go through just a few of the more common ones. So objection number one, I've never had to pay for this before. Yeah, absolutely. Address that change. Talk about how it's been free in the past, but the factors that are contributing to why you're implementing this should be something that you're very transparent about. So one of the reasons why we started charging was more and more of our time was spent doing remote consultation. And we really didn't notice that it was happening until we found ourselves either getting behind on records or not having enough time in the day to do other things. And we had to start charging for that time because it was taking us away from the opportunity to go see in-person appointments. Our practice is located in the mountains. We don't have great cell phone service. You go into a valley and you can't call clients back very easily while we're driving around here. So a lot of times we did have to wait until we were back at the office to do so. And, in that time, we sort of had to build that in a little bit to do that. So the growing demand for that time is definitely a reason to implement this. And then to do this, you don't have to skimp on the other stuff. You're still making a good income. You don't have to practice lower quality or cheaper medicine. And it does take more time. You have to manage the records from these remote consults and really give special attention to them. So, to do this, if you really grow the remote consultation, you can either charge for it, you can either inflate the rest of your fees to make up for it, but then your clients are just going to see that you're more expensive, and the ones that are not utilizing remote consultation may start exploring other cheaper options. Or option number 3 is that you just can't provide it at all. So this is just sort of a practice response that you can do that goes off of that. So the other objection, and this is one of my favorites, and I still don't understand it. This goes back to selling our time and clients only viewing us as technicians. But I don't understand why if something takes longer, it should be more expensive. There's a lot of stuff that just doesn't make sense for. Like if it takes 2 years to build a house versus 6 months, I wouldn't want to pay more for the house that took 2 years to build. I would pay more for the one that took 6 months to build. So going off of that to say that some conversations are going to be short, but that's because I know what I'm talking about, and you're getting value in that. You can also compare the level of responsibility and sort of lean into the support that they're getting as well. But really highlight that the speed of it is going to be the biggest benefit here, even if it doesn't take long. So turn into a positive thing, say, yeah, absolutely. This is going to take no time at all. Well, that's because I've been doing this for a long time. This is the, 150th one of these that I've seen, and I know exactly how to treat it. So, we can make this longer, but I don't want to waste your time. But the recommendation is still going to be sound, and it's going to have the same impact as if we took 2 or 3 hours to have this conversation. I don't think that or at least I haven't figured out a great way to say that politely in a way that clients are going to accept it and call me back. But it's something to keep in the back of your mind of just because you did it fast doesn't mean that they need to pay less for it. So implementation, this is beyond, this is going to include some client communication, but the actual practical stuff to walk away from of how are we going to do this. So understanding the fees up front is super important for having this be successful. And this study that I referenced back from 2013 looked at people's comfort and trust with insurance and medical procedures for themselves. If they had an estimate before and they saw the price, and if they did not. Knowing the price before, it lowers uncertainty. And there's a personality type, and I am that. I do not like uncertainty. Biggest stressful thing for me is to not know what I'm walking into. I need to have a plan. I need to see it in front of me. And there's a lot of people out there that approach things, businesses, veterinarians, with a lot of uncertainty, especially if you don't know them well. So to say, hey, this is how we do things. This is how much it's going to cost you. Right up front, there's nothing beyond this. We're not trying to hide it. It is immediately going to bring the stress level and the stress level down and the trust level up from that person just because you're saying that. And it really shows that you are having a more client-centric practice to even be aware that people are worried about these fees. The other main takeaway here is that your support staff is going to be absolutely critical in successfully implementing this. And I don't know how many of you out there are solo veterinarians watching this. I admire you because I couldn't do it. But being solo, when people call, they get you. Or if they leave you a voicemail and you call back, they get you. So I completely understand the challenge, and a lot of this is not going to be implementable in the terms that I'm speaking of, just because you don't have that gatekeeper. If you have that gatekeeper that answers the phone for you and at least doesn't give your client the ability to touch you whenever they want to, then they can be the person that decides, hey, Dr. So-and-so can absolutely do this, but here's what's going to happen first. And if they're interested, great. And if not, that's it. But if you're already on the phone with them and you're already getting into the conversation, it is so uncomfortable to say, whoa, all right, hold on, I got to start the timer. I'm going to start charging you for this. So totally aware of the challenge of doing that. But having a good support staff to be able to be a gatekeeper of this is going to be very, very important. So they should never be surprised about receiving a charge. You're going to have that conversation with them. You might as well have it up front before you have spent your time and invested your time, rather than after, where they're going to be upset and maybe not pay. So agreeing to a fee schedule up front is going to prevent a lot of confusion and a lot of discomfort and a lot of frustration. And then having a document to support all of this is critical. And this is something that I picked up because I have one of these with my attorney. So we I kind of adopted that into what this can look like. So billing and payment procedures. How often can your clients expect to get a bill? Is it something that they're going to get invoiced for immediately after you hang up the phone? Is it something that's going to be more ongoing so they can get a statement in the mail every single month? But it's good for them to know, here's how often you'll get billed and here's when we expect you to pay for it. The scope of services. So this is going to outline what kind of consultation services that your client's going to get from you. And this can be as specific or as broad as you like it to be, but I think that it's important for it to be there just to create more transparency. A description of the charges. So this is where you're going to say, here is how we're going to bill, whether it be hourly, by call, if this is going to be a subscription-based service, and here's how much you're going to be charged. Flat out. It's there in writing. They're going to agree to it. And everybody's going to be a lot happier when the bill comes because it's not a surprise. A data exchange agreement is something that I feel like is important, especially if you're looking at, if you're expecting information from the client to be provided for you, just so there is complete clarity about the timing of when they expect things from you. If you're asking your client to send all of the nutritional information about their horse so you can analyze it, then they need to understand that you can't analyze it until they've sent it. And that kind of applies to different consultation services as well. And then outcome contingency. To us, this seems silly because we know our profession and our, what we do is not outcome based. If the success of my practice was based on outcomes, I don't think that we would be a very successful practice. And that's because people are bringing us sick, problematic animals. So we can't only get paid when we have good outcomes. And I think that it's important to spell this out, that the client is going to be responsible to pay for it, regardless of what happens. And then staffing and availability. So we do not want to get into, we don't want to get backed up against the wall to say that just because you're paying us for remote consultation doesn't mean that you get my cell phone number. It doesn't mean that you get to call me when I'm sitting in church on Sunday. So you need to outline that as well, to say you will have access to us from here to here, and here's who will be working on your consultation, and here's who you might expect to hear from. I think that's all very important to list out there. So that is the end of the bulk of it. I've got a few client examples, but it looks like I'm not really sure how I think we're a little bit long on time, but you tell me. And if there's any other questions, I'm happy to take them.
We're good. We can go until 9:30.
Okay.
And we do have several questions that I will throw at you in no particular order, but since you still have your slideshow up, that very cool flow chart that you made about how to decide when to charge or not. The question is, how would your flow chart on fees treat a second opinion on an existing case?
So I think that would be something to charge for, because that would probably fall under the requiring records to be reviewed or analyzed. And then depending on what the second opinion is, whether that's reviewing images, tons of videos, that would be something that would take a significant amount of time to be answered. So I think that would be something to charge for.
And then we had someone actually kind of anticipate what you were talking about of having the front desk help out. What about training the front desk to offer a consultation appointment if a client wants to send pics, etc.? If client doesn't want appointment offered, our front desk does the majority of our initial communication.
Yeah, so that's a similar challenge that we have, and it's something that is sort of train as you go, because a well-trained front desk should be able to handle a lot of the questions as long as they're not diagnosing, prescribing. They should be able to answer a lot of the simple questions, but that is also a really good touch point to say, yeah, I can't answer that question. Maybe this is something that we do need to schedule a consultation for. The other times I'm thinking about something that happened today is just a consistent, repetitive ask of a similar question. So the case that I'm referencing is a chronic wound that a client is managing, but not really managing great. And it's sort of a financially limited case. So they can't afford to have us out to manage it perfectly. But they just keep repetitively asking, this isn't working, what can I do? The answer hasn't changed. The answer is going to be the same every single time. So we sort of put a stop to it today and said, please send us before after photos of when you're managing it. The doctor can review them, and then we will schedule a consultation for you to go over it and talk about this more in depth. So it's going to be difficult, and I wouldn't expect anybody to put this up at their front desk and have their front desk folks be able to perfectly do it. But I do think that it's a nice starting point, and it can definitely be built on and sort of altered to fit your particular clientele and your practice type.
Okay, we have a couple of probably more difficult questions. Do you see any downside to offering tele-advice services for remote horse owners where they have not established a VCPR? There are companies online offering this already, such as askavet.com.
Yeah, so the advice that you can legally give, and I don't know what happens on the back end of those websites, and I often think about whether or not they are following the rules of whether or not they're making a pretty serious recommendation, or they're making a presumptive diagnosis without having a VCPR. So I do think that there are downsides, and I wouldn't want it, everything is on a spectrum. I would not want it to go so far in the other way to where we start missing things and the quality of our practice goes down because we would rather do remote consultation. Because I don't think that would be appropriate for all instances. And that's why having the VCPR is super important for the implementation of this. This would not apply whatsoever for, somebody that calls just wanting advice, but they're not an established client. We haven't seen the patient. None of that would apply. We have a pretty hard no for doing stuff like that. And thankfully our front desk staff do a pretty good job of taking that abuse because it's not always a very nice response when we tell people no.
Okay, and then we have this question. Do your doctors write their own invoices? If so, have you ever had a doctor dissent and not charge the consult fee when the rest of the practice is on board? And it's not someone you can just fire, and you can't necessarily enforce this by adding charges on the back end.
Yeah. So we trying to think. We have a variety of practitioners in our practice. Variety of experience levels, people that are from the area, people that are not from the area, and I do think that as a broad overview, everybody should be okay with the idea of charging for this, and it goes back to the believing in the value of it. Some people are going to have a harder time implementing it, but this is not something that I would get upset with with an associate over. If they did a remote consult and they didn't charge for it, at least the way that we set up our fee structures, the only person that it would be hurting is themselves, really. So I wouldn't be too upset about it, but at that point, I'd be asking myself, how can I better communicate the value to get this individual to believe in this, rather than, oh, they're a dissenting individual that's not going with what I'm telling them to do.
Okay. We do have one more question from Dr. Verhagen. I'm not quite sure what it means. She asked, do you worry about recommending certain training services and not others, looking like playing favoritism or conflict? I'm not sure where the training services came in, so maybe Dr. Verhagen, you can fill us in more. Oh, but we did have another question come up. How about the emergencies you fix over the phone? Good VCPR, client calls and gives the info, we talk, provide guidance, medication dosage, and in an hour, everything is fixed. I don't have to travel or go out in the night. They save money. I've done this for 37 years and I'd love to be compensated. I like your idea of they get a free one time a year call. And that may be how I work this into my practice.
Yeah, so what some folks are doing is it might require some changes in the technology that your practice utilizes, but our after hours emergency, the client calls and they hit an extension, whether they have a small or a large animal emergency, and they leave a voicemail. And then the doctor on call gets paged, they listen to the voicemail, and then they call the client back. For those folks that have an answering service, depending on the answering service, there could be, have that touch point gatekeeper person say, hey, there's going to be a charge to connect you to the doctor. If this is resolved over the phone, that is where the charge will go. And if it's something that the doctor needs to come out to see, that charge is going to go towards your bill there. That can be implemented with a voicemail as well, but that would require that client be established, have some sort of form of payment that's already on file, or have some sort of online way to submit that. But I think it all comes back to just the communication. I think that having these conversations, being upfront, whether it says, hey, if you leave a message and I call you back, you can expect to be charged $50 or whatever for this emergency consultation. And then if they hang up when they hear that, then that's it. And if they leave a message after hearing that, that is pretty much assumed consent that they're willing to pay that.
Cool. Okay. I don't see any more questions in the queue at the moment.
Okay. Well, I'm just
wait, I lied.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Dr. Verhaeg. She cleared up my question. Her understanding was that Dr. Pop guided his clients, especially new clients, with training to help them with good horsemanship and safety. How does he recommend certain trainers without alienating other trainers?
So I always frame it as clients have the free choice to do that. And we keep an ongoing list of both people that train horses and farriers in our area. And it's just a spreadsheet and we send them all. And it's assumed that if they are on this list, we would trust any one of them to either trim horses' feet or train our horses. And then we tell clients, hey, take your pick. You can decide who you use. We all trust them. They're all great. But, just like choosing a veterinarian, they might get along with one and not with another. It's very personality based as well. So we just give it to them and let them make that decision for themselves.
Okay, very good. And another question. I
Sure.
warned you ahead of time that all the questions would come in at the last minute.
That's fine.
So this writer says veterinary teletriage does not require a VCPR, emergency situations and general advice. What are your thoughts on combining partnering with a teletriage platform that can handle the emergency calls that don't actually need emergent attention and notifying the on-call doctor for the true emergencies, while simultaneously setting up your own daytime consult platform for your practice? That was a big, long question.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea, because that would sort of lessen the stress of after hours on call for those things that can be answered just with a question. I guess the only challenge would be how you would do that for the daytime. But I think that's a great thought to move in that direction for the things that just need a conversation after hours.
Yeah, and Dr. Arefaj, who has actually done a webinar for us before on teletriage, reminds us that this is what VetTriage does. That's the name of his service.
Very cool. Very cool.
Okay, that's the end of the questions at the moment.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to go through 3 really quick examples, some wins and some losses. So something that we do, not equine, but remote consultation is some sheep breeding consultation. So we have a client that breeds purebred sheep, and they sell little starter flocks to their clients. And we have a shared document that's a spreadsheet that they keep up to date. And periodically they'll say, hey, we have somebody that's looking for a flock with 1 breeding ram and 3 breeding ewes. Can you tell us who we should put together? So I have ongoing, I'm like an inbreeding coefficients, and it's sort of an ongoing living document. But that took a lot of time to put together. And every single time they ask, I start a timer when I start working, and I stop it when I'm done, and send them the recommendations, and then they get a bill. So this was something that we did talk, very in depth about at first. The bill was high at first, implementing it, and then it's, gotten lower over time just because it's sort of maintenance. But, something like this is very doable. As far as a loss, so we had a client who we diagnosed their horse with Cushing's, and they wanted to schedule some time for us to talk all about Cushing's. And I can't remember how many lectures it took when I was in school for them to teach me about Cushing's, but it was essentially everything. What the disease is, how to manage it, what the medications do, how do they work, how do you administer it. It took us over an hour. I think it was an hour and a half conversation. Myself and another one of the associates, we both were blocked off time. We sat in front of a phone and we answered every single one of these questions. We charged consultation time. They got the bill and they were livid. They were so upset that we could possibly charge for a phone call. We did end up collecting that money from them after a long explanation, but that was our fault because those charges weren't communicated to them. They were expecting that we would just sit down and have a nice chat, and that would be free. So just emphasizing that communicating this up front is going to be very important. And then going back to the example that I was talking about earlier, so we put together, and this was all done remotely via phone call, but answering the questions of what we need SOPs for, how do we evaluate these foals once they're born to see who is going to be, the better candidate for going into this type of work and so forth, a kit to have, when to call the vet, all the way back to how often should we be checking the mares, what medications should we have on hand, what actual breeding protocols should we be doing. We helped them figure all of this out and did charge hourly consultation for all of that as well. So that was sort of a big upfront fee, but it has saved them a ton of money, because if they tried to do this on their own, they would be in low reproductive rates, sick animals, potentially injured animals. So that is kind of how we framed it to them, to say, let's get this figured out up front, and that will make everybody's life way easier down the road. And that is the last thing that I have.
Now, that is the most perfect timing ever.
Well, good. That's great. Yeah, 9:29.
This is
wow.
Great. Dr. Pop, thank you so very much for this really excellent presentation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I see a lot of thumbs up and clapping hands going by. Oh, and a few confettis and hearts. So yes, lots of appreciation. Now, this is the thing I always forget to tell my panelists before we start, but if you have a question you haven't asked, and you know how it is, you hang up and then you go, oh, I should ask that question. You can send that question to me, attendees, and I will pass it along to Dr. Pop for the next week. I don't keep my panelists on the hook forever. I would have to pay them consultation fees in that case. But now, if you do have a question, I stuck my email address in the chat, and you can send that email to me and I will pass it along. So attendees, thank you so much for your excellent questions and your attention. And Dr. Pop, wow, that was an awesome presentation. Really, really good. Yeah. And of course, thank you to our sponsor, American Regent Animal Health, and their representative, Dr. Kelly Matheny, who was able to say a few words to us at the beginning. And of course, thanks to my IT man behind the curtain, Kevin Hinchman, who once again didn't have to do anything because everything worked. Yay! So with that, I think I'm just going to do the awkward hanging up on everybody. And we'll see you again in a couple more weeks. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I am going to end it here.